With this photograph, we are going to explore how we can add a bit of motion blur and then how we can use masking and multiple layers in order to get that motion blur to look even better. Well, I captured this image by sitting in the back of someone's car while this cyclist was biking up the mountains in Santa Barbara on a rainy day. And I like the perspective and the angle and a little bit of the road there in the background, but I want to add a touch more drama here, a little bit more excitement. I want to bring in some blur. And so in order to do that, let's first start off by copying the background layer. Press Command or Control J, and then let's name this new layer Motion. And we'll go ahead and then navigate to our Filter pull-down menu. Here we're going to choose Blur and then Motion Blur. Now, what's interesting about motion blur is we need to determine a good angle, right? Because we need to determine how should this motion actually pan out. In this case, it looks like he's kind of coming towards us and almost turning a corner. And it gives us a perspective like he's going down a little bit. Then next, what we want to do is dial in our overall distance. I'm going to add quite a bit of motion blur here, then click OK. Well, here at this juncture, this is just way over the top. But what I want to do is build this up slowly. So I want to create a mask filled with black. You remember how to do that? You hold down Option or Alt, and then you click on the Add Layer Mask icon. That creates a mask filled with black, concealing all of the motion. Next, we'll grab our brush tool. We'll start off with a real low opacity, somewhere below 50%. I'm going to try 35 or 40 there. I'm just going to start to paint on the concrete. And I'm going to paint in that area because it's a pretty neutral area, but I just want to see how this is going to start to look as I build this up. As I do that, I realize that's even a bit too high, so I'm going to go down to the 20s. I'm just going to start to build up a little bit of blur in some of these surrounding areas. The background, we'll crank our opacity up even more because that can have more blur to it, right? We'll start to bring in that trailing edge off the cyclist. And I'm just going to bring that in by clicking and painting along these edges. Now I need to lower the opacity as I come over to this area because it's already a little bit blurry and it doesn't need to be quite so blurry. So one of the things that you're discovering here is that it's nice to paint in different amounts of blur depending on the area of the photograph that you're working on. So here we'll just go ahead and try to paint through some of these areas, adding a bit of blur and a little bit of drama, and just make our way through a couple of these areas. The trick is that what you want to do is add blur. You don't want to go over the top though, but you also don't want to do too little blur. And so here I've changed my brush size, just painting this in different areas in order to try to just build up a touch of drama. All right, well, let's take a look at how we're doing. Here we have that before and then after. All right, well, I think that's nice. I'll lower the opacity just a bit and just give a little bit of a glow there when you lower the opacity. Next, click on my adjustment layer icon and choose curves. With curves, I'm going to bring up my contrast. So I'm going to bring down that black point and then bring up my white point. I also want to change the color a little bit, so I'm going to go into that blue-yellow channel, and I'm going to bring up a little bit of the yellows there, go back to red cyan, bring up some of the reds, just add to the overall vibrance of this photograph. Here's before and after. Now that I look at it, I think I'm going to go back to my motion layer and crank up the opacity all the way. I don't think it looked very good that low. All right, well, the next step is to merge to top. Click in your topmost layer and press Shift, Option, Command, E. And what we're going to do here is apply motion blur again. And to reopen the last filter that we've used, we can use a shortcut. If you're on a Mac, you press Command F. On Windows, you can press Control F. Or you can simply go to your filter pull-down menu and then choose blur and motion blur one more time. All right, well, now here what I want to do is change the angle just a little bit and then add a touch more blur to this image. I'll click OK. At this juncture, let's add that layer mask in. Grab our brush tool. We'll paint with black with a pretty high opacity. And I want to bring in this front edge here and just bring in a lot of detail on the cyclist. The great thing about this is we're stacking up this effect. We're building it little by little. And as we do that, we can come up with some pretty cool results, kind of adding more and more to this. The trick with good blur, I think, in situations like this is a lot of patience. I mean, it's taking time to really paint in that detailed mask. Here in a demo file, we're not going to take that much time to get it looking perfect, so it's going to have a little bit more work that we'll need to do. But nonetheless, you can see how we're starting to progress and add up a touch more blur. Next thing we might want to do is go to our mask panel and just blur out those brush strokes. Also, perhaps lower the density a little bit on your mask, allowing a little bit more blur through on some of those sharper areas. All right, well, at this juncture, we have a pretty interesting effect. Let's take a look. Here's the overall before and then after. A very different photograph. Lastly, we may want to lower the opacity. When you lower the opacity, sometimes your image will look like it's glowing a bit. So you just want to be careful that you have just the right amount so you have that nice detail there. Well, here at this juncture, I think just a touch down is good, a little bit less than 100%. Last thing I'm going to do is merge to top and add film grain. Press Shift, Option, Command E on a Mac, Shift, Alt, Control E on Windows. Here we'll choose Grain. We'll zoom in a bit, and we'll go to Filter, Noise, and then Add Noise. And once we choose Add Noise, what we want to do is Gaussian, monochromatic. We want to have just a small amount of noise. But by adding noise in a uniform way over the entirety of the photograph, what it can do is it can really make this blur look a little bit more edgy, a little bit more realistic. And I'm just lowering this down little by little till I find a nice spot for this. We don't need a ton of noise, but we do want some good noise in there, softening up some of those areas. And again, I think right here looks pretty good. There's that before and then after, adding a bit more edginess to that photograph. Click OK to apply that. And here we have it. Having fun with blur, our overall before and then after.